All right, welcome back, Jack of all trades. We got another great episode for you in store today. We've got at Jack Viking on Twitter, Jack Newman. I'm your host, Gates Haug at First Gator on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to us there. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode, we're going to dive right into taking a look at the NFL schedule, more specifically the Vikings schedule, since we're Vikings fans. And Jack, the schedules came out. We're excited. I've got the schedule open here. Usually, what I typically do in a season is I go down each game. I put a win loss right next to them right away. So Green Bay. I'll go Green Bay win one, lose one. But then my misconception is going to be right. I'm like, well, we're better than the Bears. There's 2 wins. We're better than the Lions. There's 2 wins. Tell me, there's got to be a better way to take a look at this other than the way I'm doing it, right? I mean, what's a better way to take a look at this thing?
Well, I mean, with the schedule, the idea or the biggest thing to remember is there's so much more based off randomness than based off your opinions or everybody's opinions or anything else. So, and when it comes down to the NFL, that my heuristic is just that the schedule's not a big deal. It's fun to talk about. I think it's fun to look at, like, oh, this game, that's going to be an important game. It's a division game, and who do we play on the road? Who do we play at home? Stuff like that. But to sit there and put like a Twitter opinion out, like, oh, the Vikings have a tough schedule, or New England has a hard schedule, and the Saints have an easy schedule, or Tampa has an easy, whatever. It's like nobody has a hard schedule. Nobody has an easy schedule. Everybody has about the same schedule. If we're looking at it in a predictive way, as far as like, if you could do it a number of different ways. Where I have I'll do like a preseason predictive model. Based on different models, and like 538 will put out a predictive model on who they think is going to win, or not who they think is going to win, but what your odds are. They'll have a playoff odds and all these different things preseason, and then it'll change week to week to week with your result and how good you are. But at the beginning, everyone's pretty even on their odds. The ranges from over unders of potential wins are more like 11-5, not how we finished the season last year, like 14-2,
Okay. So basically what you're saying is, going from season to season, instead of breaking down individual schedules for each team, you're kind of assuming that the teams they all even themselves out from season to season, right? So you're going to play just as many 12-4s as 4-12s. And
right.
Like, it doesn't matter which team that is. It's just
exactly. And it's usually not the teams you think it's going to be. It's a perfect example of like this year, everybody looks at Minnesota plays at Tampa, at New Orleans. Okay, it's like, oh man, New Orleans will be great. Tampa's got Brady, and if you do that game thing, you're going to go loss, because those are like 2 of the hardest games they play, and it's like, well, you're going to give them the loss for that. Well, let's just say Minnesota's a 4-point underdog in those games. That point spreads can imply like a percent chance of winning. So if Minnesota is a 35% chance to win those games, conversely a 65% chance to lose, well, let's get my handy calculator out here. But if the chances of Minnesota losing both those games at 0.65 is 0.65 times 0.65, and that's, there's only a 42% chance that they're going to lose both of those games. Yet everybody who's doing that week by week pick thing and then coming out with a record goes L. When in actuality, it's more likely going to be LW or WL. They're more likely to split those games than they are. And then so instead of going through and doing each game, if you put like a win percentage based on point spread, it's a more accurate way to guess your win total, instead of putting a binary win or loss on individually 16 games. It's like, how difficult is our schedule in aggregate? How good are we? And and what's our most likely, landing spot. And teams like the Vikings, who are good, like a good team from the year before, wasn't like a dominant team from the year before. Those are like 9-ish win teams the next year on average. And there's all these different variables that go into the actual result.
Now you have a lot of data. You do a lot of spreadsheet work. When you're applying your spreadsheet, show us some of the things you take a look at on your spreadsheet when you're analyzing, maybe on a game-to-game basis, or just as the season in as a whole. Even are there certain things that you're looking at more than others? Let's say, or is it?
Well, let me just push up. This is a little sloppy spreadsheet I have here. Can you see my sheet now?
Yes.
Okay. So this goes back to last year. It's just kind of a running thing I had, and then I pasted in. I'm just working on it, kind of with the new schedule, and
Okay.
I'm pasting in some of last year, and so what I like to do from year to year is like come up with last year and kind of regress some of the totals. So I use like a thing like DVOA off of Football Outsiders. I'll use like the point total, points win total. Do you see where I highlighted this Python?
Yep.
It's not Python, Pythagorean. And this is a win. This is like an estimated win total based on points. And where DVOA is an efficiency based. It's based on each play and how efficient it is. So it's just an efficiency rating. And then by using teams' efficiency ratings, they come up with an estimated win total. And then I've got like an actual win total for teams. And this is from 2019. I scroll, I've got these all going back to 2014. And then like over here, I'll have like an average. So here's an average for every team. So here's the team Seattle. And then this DVOA win total, this is an average of going back the last 6 years. And then there's their points wins for the last 6 years. And then there's their actual wins averaged. So did you see those? I don't know. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
So what I find interesting about this is, so when I refer to DVOA average, that's average wins based on DVOA, like expected wins. So that's what, you get lucky or unlucky, you might end up with, if you're 10, you might end up with 12 if you're lucky, or 8 if you're unlucky. So this is their DVOA, this is their Python, and then here's their actual. And if you look, these are really close, if you do it over long periods of time. These 11, 12, 12, 10, 10, 9.3, they're not off by much. Like, look at the Vikings. We're Viking fans, right? Their 6-year average, this is the Zimmer era, 9.4 DVOA, 9.4 Python, 9.6 actual, or 9.58. I mean, and everyone's pretty similar. So what I kind of gather from that are these are pretty good tools for assessing how good a team is. Like, in the long run, your win expectation is about what you're going to win. And these random numbers over here, this whole block, these are year to year changes from so this is like, that tells you like how much teams improve or how much better they get or worse they get from year to year.
Okay.
And why I did this was, like, if you look over here, this is like the average of all those years. Teams, they don't change by a lot overall. Like, you can look a lot of times at, like, Seattle in 6 years, 3 of them, they were pretty much the same team they were 1 year to the next as far as how good they are. Now, it's 3 out of 5 years. So teams change there. They changed 3 games, 2 games, 2 games, 3 games. Once in a while, you get a team like Dallas that went back in 2016 when, Dak was a rookie, and they got 7.5 games better. That's like the biggest anyone's changed in the last 6 years. And you'll see the Rams, when Sean McVay's first year, right there.
Right.
They got 6.7 games better. And then they got even a little better the next year and went to the Super Bowl. And you can just see, and that's just a number that just explains that. And I know like people's opinions are fairly accurate on it, kind of in historically. I mean, the Giants had a huge drop off in 2017. So it's like, where's the Vikings, right? We know the Vikings. So Zimmer comes in his first year, they got 2 games better, and they won the division. They had some fortune, went 11-5. The next year they didn't get much worse, but they had some bad luck, some injuries, lost some close games. If you remember, a couple really close games in Detroit, and they missed the playoff game. They missed playoffs by 1 game the last week. And then they got back in 17. They got 3.5 games better, 3.4, and they had a little luck go their way, and they win 17. So this is kind of a flow of how teams. This is kind of a flow how from year to year they get better or worse, and I think the overall picture is a lot of they're on average they don't get a lot better or a lot worse, but they do change. And then here, then with these columns, it kind of gives you an idea that these numbers are worth following. Is that over longer sample sets, the expected DVOA wins and the expected net point wins gets you close to the actual. And where that's like interesting is when you look at last year's Packers 13. People like to refer to the Packers as a 13-win team. You see over here.
Yeah.
In this. So if I look at this column here, I got Green Bay and green for obvious reasons. Right. They were an estimated 9.9, 9.8, and an actual 13. So if you go and you look at how these teams from year to year, and look at Green Bay, from year to year, they haven't changed much. They're a little worse, 2 games worse, 0.3 better, 2 games better. There hasn't been that drastic of a change. Yet we've seen them go from, 7 wins? Is that their bottoms? Maybe 6 wins. We've seen them go from 10, 11 wins down to 6 or 7 wins, back to 13. So there's like a big swings in actual wins, but truthfully, the biggest drop off was when Aaron Rodgers would get hurt, because he's good, and they had terrible backups, and then when he comes back, they got better, and then they got lucky, and I don't care. I'm a Vikings fan, whatever. They got lucky. The Vikings had some good luck in some of their years of 2017, so it's not like I'm pointing out the Packers were fortunate to win. I mean, the DVOA estimate and the Pythagorean estimate for the Vikings was better than the Packers. And I fully understand the Packers won the 2 head-to-head games, but those games were close. They could have gone either way. That's kind of the point. But anyway, so when you regress some of these numbers, they get, from year to year, teams will kind of regress to the mean. And then you get these here's your Vegas lines
so really quick. Go from you're talking about taking, because there's certain outliers over here. We showed the examples of like the Rams, and that it's so rare. It looks like over 6 seasons that something like that really stands out that much that you probably shouldn't expect it to happen. It's pretty safe to say. So then you go back to your DVOA numbers, and that's like bringing you back to reality. So that's where you find that. Is that where you're factoring in your regression for the team? Is you're taking that outlier number and then bringing them back down to earth, if you will, as far as the Green Bay Packers goes on this one, and then now you're going to take that and assess how are you looking at it with the Las Vegas line? Like, how are you comparing it to that, or how is it?
Right. So the over time, and we'll get into more of this later at different times, but teams do kind of regress a little bit, we'll say. And then a good reality is, so this is how I'll come up with my model based on last year's numbers and then slightly regressed. And then, like you said, it's nice to compare that to, I'll hide these two. So these 2 columns right here, you compare, this is the Vegas line here, the 2020 line, and then this is kind of my tentative model. I'm still working on some statistics and whether I got them, I kind of fit it into the last 6 years to kind of optimize it. But for the most part, these are pretty decent model values going from 2019 to 2020.
Okay.
And then you can see how they're pretty similar. Like Vegas will generally have a little higher number because life's too short to bet the under is kind of a philosophy of the public. So I think lines tend to be a little overvalued
Sure.
in general. And so you could one good way to even just to test that out, right, is if I just add my model value, it comes out to 256, and then if I add the line value, it's 263.
Okay.
So it's not a lot, but it's a little high, I would say, just a little, because they're not giving away money. But
yeah, it's safe to say Packers fans aren't going to be taking the under on the Packers this season.
exactly. So Vegas, and that ought to tell you something, right? The Packers won 13 games last year, and I listened to podcasts and guys talking about, oh, don't panic, because of the draft, or don't panic because this, and they'll say this is a 13-win team, and I'm like, this is a 13-win team. Yeah, they won 13 games, but their DVOA is 9-9, and so I think it's good to have as a fan. I think it's good to have some reality. I think personally, my perspective as a fan is, I want to have a realistic idea of what the value is,
Right.
because I don't want to go run around making, bets with friends like, oh, I bet you this team, like, oh, I bet the Vikings have a better record than the Chiefs. It's like, well, that's a bad idea. The Chiefs are 10.8 on my model, and the Vikings are 9.1. That's not now if it's for a lemonade at the turn playing golf, then fine, make the bet. But if you're going to bet,
You want a half then too, even if it is lemonade, right?
right, like, so let's keep it fair. Or if I'm a Viking fan and I'm talking to a Bear fan, and I'll say, yeah, let's do it. They're a 7.8 and we're a 9.1. I'm good. And then Vegas has 9.1 and 8 for the Bears, and these Vegas numbers. And as you see these Vegas numbers, there's only two teams with 11, and that's Baltimore and Kansas City. And Vegas is a little over on those. That's because good hype teams from the year before will tend to be overhyped. And even then you got teams like San Francisco and they're at 10.8, and New Orleans, who everyone just gaga over New Orleans, right? Like, oh, they're a Super Bowl making a run, Breeze and all that. It's like they're a 9.8 on my model, and I'm fine with that. Like, I don't see any reason to just think, oh yeah, the same people I don't know, they get these certain team wins 13 games the year before, and they seem to think it'll just happen again, yet it almost never does. Because the Saints, everyone thinks the Saints, oh, they've been so great with Breeze and Peyton. Well, they've been a 9.6, 9.7, 9.2, or 9.7, 9.2, and their actual average is 9.6. They're just like the Vikings, like the Vikings 9.4, 9.4, 9.6. It's fractions of a game difference over a 6-year period. But I feel like maybe I'm a Vikings fan and it's a poor me thing, but I just feel like there's maybe an overvaluing of somebody like the Saints. And so I think this 9.8 gives you kind of a touch of reality. And that's where, when it comes back to the schedule, people see the Vikings, you see at Saints on your schedule, and it seems so daunting. But just expectation going into the year is the Saints are maybe a half point better than the Vikings. So big deal, kind of like what you saw in the playoffs. Like, everybody thought the Saints were unbeatable and the Vikings win the game. So it's like, reality is a lot more compressed in the NFL to the middle than I think the hype train and the 4-letter network train wants you to think.
Yeah, and it certainly sounds like the way they're talking, the Saints, if they have any chance, they're going to have to go through Tampa. Is that what I'm understanding? They're going to have to get through Tampa to get into it. But
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, oh yeah, that's Brady, that whole thing. Don't that's another show, another time, in how I'm not that sold on that Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady's old and not nearly as good as he used to be. So I don't know how he will reduce the downside interceptions. I think, but I don't know if Tampa might have to sacrifice some explosiveness, and I don't know what that makes them. I know what they were last year, and that was if I go back to here, they were an 8-win Pythagorean team. They were only efficiency wise a 7.1. They won 7 actually. Um, Not great, right? Uh,
right,
and a lot of that was Jameis's interception. So if you reduce those, you definitely get better. But Vegas likes them 2 games better, whereas Vegas up here has taken 1 game off of New England. So there's an extra game in there, right?
yeah,
Um, and so is that Gronk? I don't know. Give him a little bit for Gronk, but I don't know how good Gronk's going to be coming out of retirement. And so I think it's a little overcooked. And so I certainly will raise my model value theoretically because Tom Brady over Winston, it has theoretical value. I just don't know that it has, what people want to portray. I'm personally a lot higher on Winston maybe than the rest, and a lot lower on Brady than the rest. I acknowledge Brady's better and likely to be better, but 2 games seems like a lot there. So when you say that, it's like, yeah, if Tampa's an 8.5 or even a 9 and the Saints are 9.8, could go either way. In a 16-game season, it's a very small sample size. Yeah, Tampa could win the division. New Orleans is a favorite. But I'll even go so far to look at I won't look at Carolina. They're in a rebuild. So they're at a 6.4, and I'd make that even lower because of the rebuild and the turnover. But Atlanta, they're an 8.1. They've made some changes. They're kind of desperate coaches, desperate GM. They're kind of in a win now or get fired mode.
yeah,
So that might make them better. You know what I mean? In the short term. Like if you go all in the short term, that makes you better. When the Bears traded Khalil Mack for too much trade value and too much salary, well, it made the Bears a lot better in 2018. But I don't know that it made them better for the next 4 years. So like if you want to evaluate long term, short term, so having a win now mode like New Orleans, like Atlanta, like Tampa with Tom Brady, it does kind of push these teams a little higher, whereas Carolina is all for the future, hired a new coach. He's got a long contract, a long view of everything. That might push them a little lower because when you take a model, it's not a straight thing. It's to me, it's more of a guideline, and then you do some shading based on these individual moves, the best that you can evaluate them. And I think for shading, it is good to look at this Vegas line here and just see where's the market shading it, and but yeah, you look at these numbers and you got a lot of 8s and 7s and 10s and 9s, 8, 7, 7, 10. There's very few 5s and there's very few 11s, and so when you take that into account, when you have this random 16 opponent schedule, it's gonna come out around an 8. Like everybody's schedule is similar to everybody else's schedule.
yeah. It certainly sees that. That's why you have some regression in these lines. Vegas will certainly tell you that year in and year out. It seems, folks. This has just been a quick look at some of the numbers Jack's looking at. in his analysis for this upcoming schedule. We'll get into more of the NFL scheduling on the next episode. So thanks for tuning in, and be sure to tune in next time on Jack of All Trades.